Thank you very much indeed, Megan. Much appreciated. The title of my talk is Technological Approaches to Diamond Exploration on the Thorny River Prospect in South Africa. But before I kick off, it would be remiss of me not to make a couple of comments on Peter Major's excellent presentation of this morning. If you do discover a commercial diamond deposits, the returns can be very, very good. My previous but one company, African Diamonds PLC, also listed on the London AIM market and Botswana Stock Exchange, rewarded their original shareholders 25 times, and those shareholders who maintain their rights all the way through 10 times. So it can be done. It's not solely the domain of the majors. And then secondly, there is more diamond exploration taking place in Canada and Australia than in Africa combined. If I go back to before the 2009 financial crisis, there are probably a dozen or more people like myself and companies like myself listed on the various stock exchanges active in Southern Africa. And at the moment, I think we're the only listed junior active in South Africa. And we're one of only two active listed juniors in Botswana. The other one is Pangolin Diamonds, a TSXV company. And at the moment, there are no listed active diamond juniors in Zimbabwe. So this is a rare space to be in, but we believe it's a highly prospective space. And echoing what Sarah said earlier, we believe Africa is elephant country. So why are we looking at the Thorny River area itself? Thorny River is about 50 kilometers east of Mokopane, about 3 hours north of where many of us are based actually here in Gauteng. And then if you look at the graphic on the right-hand side taken from Allen in 1999, this is the Marsfontein blow pit. Marsfontein was a 0.4 hectare, 0.4, let me just repeat that, 0.4 hectare blow on an echelon kimberlite dike stream, and it had a capital recoupment of 3.5 days. Now, I'd love to know in the chat box later if anyone knows of another mine which has such a rapid payback. So what we're looking for here are small but very, very rich potential diamond deposits. The outline of my talk will be as follows. Of course, I start with the general geology, because that sets the context for what we are doing. I talk about the history, because that's equally important, especially the contextual history at that time, our strategy. And as this is a showcase, a technological showcase, I give a slide to each of the different technologies we've deployed, the results, and then a conclusion. So firstly, moving on to the introduction and the general geology, there are two major units here. The first is the Transvaal supergroup made up of Tunisport dolomites, Black Reef Formation, and these are what we call the Straatportberg Mountains, which surround the Umkumpi Valley, made up of Archean turfloop and Meinhardt-Skarl granites. The Zebedela kimberlites start just west of the Klipspringer mine on the left-hand side of the graphic and go all the way through to the Doornrivier farm to the right. And on this on-echelon on-dike swarm, which is about 155 million years old or thereabouts, you've got several blows. You've got the Kudu blow, the Sugarbird blow, and the Sugarbird Pass blow, which are all in the Transvaal supergroup to the west, and the only blow, and this you'll see is a bit of a theme in my presentation in the Archean granites, is that of the Marsfontein mine. So a bit of the history of the area. This area was sampled by De Beers in the 1970s and 1980s. And by the way, everything in my presentation is public domain and is the official history. So I'm not going to talk about what may have happened in smoke-filled rooms or in the bush at that particular time. Klipspringer was discovered in 1987 by De Beers, and I was leading the team at that time. And then in 1995, Southern Era discovered Marsfontein, and then a joint venture was formed between De Beers and Southern Area, which ran the mine from 1999 to 2000, and this had a payback of 3.5 days. I say less than 4 days here. with just under 1 million tons, producing just under 2 million carats in 18 months. They mined a 10-meter bench out every month. And for those who run large mines or involved with large mines, typically a bench lasts 1 year. There were 3 further blows discovered, and I've mentioned the names of those. And interestingly, the Sugarbird blow, which is close to the Klipspringer mine, again, a small blow, and this is just over 0.3 hectares in size. This provided sufficient capital for the development of the Klipspringer mine itself, which is an underground fissure mine. This mine was run from 1998 to 2004, and the mine was placed on care and maintenance following flooding. And this was unsurprising because the guys at that time took out the crown pillar. It was in a V-neck valley. The water came pouring down the valley and flooded the underground mine. Since that time, the mine has not been reopened. It's been owned by several different companies: Moana Africa PLC, Assa Resource Group PLC, and now SLA Capital, and none of which have got involved with the mine, chiefly because they've been involved with other things such as gold and elsewhere. But you see the disclosed resource statement has 2.2 million tons at 73 CPHT. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see the Sugarbird Blow pit. It's quite stunning to get there. It's very difficult to get there now because the road has been washed away, so it's quite a hard walk. The Marsfontein pit, which if you go onto YouTube now, is typically used for diving and swimming and recreation for people from Polokwane and Mokopane. And then underground at Klipspringer, you can see me shining my torch on what is the kimberlite on echelon dike swarm within a dolomitic terrain. So what is our strategy here? Yes, some may think everything there is yet to be found, but my chairman has got a great saying that where best to find a mine is close to a mine. It's called the science of closeology, but there's a very, very good reason behind that. This area produces abundant kimberlitic indicators, garnet, spinel, and chromium dioxide, but also abundant ilmenite too as well, and I'll get onto that later. Electromagnetics produces good anomalies over the kimberlite, and the blows tend to occur on the confluence of the kimberlite and the dolerite dikes. So again, unsurprisingly, they're structurally controlled. But here's the interesting thing, is that some of the blows, and in particular Marsfontein, and please look at the graphic on the right-hand side from Scott 2005, some of these blows can be obscured by the dolerite or the diabase dike. And in fact, if one goes to the M1 pipe itself, there was less than a 5-meter subsurface exposure of the pipe. And once one got below the dolerite, there was a 40-meter exposure. So you can imagine that if there was a dolerite that covered most of the kimberlite itself, or just gave your normal, should I say, 0.5 to 1 meter surface expression of the dike itself, you would not find the blow sitting underneath it. So what you're looking at here is precision geological techniques, which I'd like to take you through now. So what are the technological approaches that we use? The first one is soil sampling. Now, this is a tried and tested technique in kimberlite exploration. And you'll see I've used a reference from Scott 2005 of the Marsfontein grid and our own kimberlitic indicators on the right-hand side. And very clearly, you can see the eclogitic and peridotitic garnets, as well as chromium dioxide and spinel. These are very common, very abundant. There's a very strong halo effect. And typically, you would find your kimberlite using the +1 or even +2 millimeter fraction. There's no need to go down to the 0.5 or the 0.41 or 0.3 millimeter to find these kimberlites, because the surface terrain, these kimberlites are fairly close to the surface, and there's only your normal tropical weathering terrain in the area. Following soil sampling, you would typically use ground geophysics, and the first technique here would be ground magnetic. And this tends to outline the dolerite dikes, as the kimberlite dikes are only weakly magnetic. But this technique is used in combination with the next technique to actually identify the kimberlite itself. This is a quick and a relatively cheap technique. And this is the first picture you can see of the terrain there. So unsurprisingly, why we called it Thorny River, because the area is very full of thorns. So we use magnetics in combination with electromagnetics, or in this particular case, we call it max-min, because when you use these in combination with each other, you can then almost deduct the magnetic signal of the dolerite dike to give your kimberlite dikes, and this works extremely well. So much so that when we undertake our percussion drilling program, reverse technique, we have at least an 80% probability of hitting the kimberlite itself. This is also a quick and a relatively cheap technique. And then when we find areas where we believe there to be blows, and just go back in mind to the strategy slide I had earlier in terms of the confluence of the dolerite and the kimberlite dikes, and where we believe from field mapping and other techniques, a blow may be masking a potential, a dolerite may be masking a potential blow. We then use gravity. And this works extremely well, as we all know in this area, that kimberlite pipes produce gravity lows. It's a more time-consuming and a complex technique. It is also more costly, and being a junior company who wishes to spend most of its money in the ground rather than on any other form of overhead, we are very, very targeted in terms of our gravity techniques. We have also used ground penetrating radar. This is been particularly used over the Marsfontein sheet gravels. Marsfontein not only was a very, very rich pipe, and for those of you who want to read the history, please look it up on the reference, but it had a very, very high grade colluvial gravel sitting on top of it in the order of over 1.5 carats per ton. So close to the Marsfontein pit, you have what they call the Marsfontein channel gravel, which was chiefly worked out by the operators at that time. But there is also a Marsfontein sheet gravel, which is almost a detritus or slope going from the Marsfontein southeastwards. And we've used ground penetrating radar to actually identify some of the channels in that gravel, which of course would be those areas which we'll target for bulk sampling and then for future mining. We've also been trialing a technique called induced polarisation. This was brought to us by the Council for Geoscience, who we're working in partnership with. And this is particularly used in the area where we're looking at the electrical chargeability of subsurface material. And why this is important for kimberlite is because this actually targets the weathered zone of the kimberlite itself. And typically in this area, you would only start to see the fresh kimberlite 12 to 15 meters below the surface. You would have maybe 1 meter or 2 of regolith, and in between the regolith and the fresh kimberlite itself, you would have weathered kimberlite. This is still very much work in progress, but it basically talks to the kind of different technologies we're looking at to try and find something which has not been found so far. Because, of course, if we carry on doing what has been done in the past, we'll carry on getting the same results, and it's not really worth exploring here or actually anywhere else. The previous talk was drone surveys. We, of course, use drone surveys a great deal. This is a great technique to go through the thick bush itself. It provides fantastic georeferences for our drilling and geological work. It produces great work for our vegetation anomalies, for our structural mapping. It also produces a great tool for our public relations videos, because like any junior, we have to produce these kind of things. And we're very fortunate that Vatomi's finance director is an official drone pilot, very competent and very passionate about this technology. And it's always good when you have such good support from the money man in the organization coming to do this kind of technical work. And then a technology or a thinking that is beginning to get developed now is what we call precision structural mapping. Yes, this has been around for a very, very long period of time, but I don't know how many people actually do this level of precision structural mapping allied with very detailed field work, because there's no substitute for getting your boots on the ground and doing the work. in alignment with the detailed geophysics. A UK group called Subterrane is doing this work, but sadly it's still work in progress because the gentleman from Subterrane has been unable to visit South Africa for about 1.5 years with the COVID pandemic, but we hope that'll soon pass. Spectral analysis, this was, we did a lot of work through a group called Terra Modeling Services in Canada. This technique uses machine and deep learning to delineate spectral anomalies using publicly available European Space Agency data. We looked at a number of different facets of that: structure topography, epidotum chlorite alteration, radon, ferrous, aster, mica, and serpentine. And this technique has yet to find an anomaly which we are yet to drill, but I'm optimistic that the further we push the boundaries behind this, that we will actually find something using this technique. Reverse circulation percussion drilling, we all know this is a standard in the geological toolbox. This is what we typically use to identify the kimberlite. You can see examples of the drill chips, both wet and dry, on the right-hand side. And this is very good for rapidly looking at discovering the kimberlite itself. And then what we've typically done is we've taken those indicators, so we've taken those drill chips on a 1 meter basis and used an independent laboratory to recover the diamonds and kimberlitic indicators from them. And then, of course, core drilling, which is a bulk standard, again, in the geological toolkit. This is actually used where we need more detailed geological work itself, particularly with regard to petrography and particularly with regard to the kimberlite morphology on a centimeter or meter level. And then, of course, we use that core for microdiamond work, which assists enormously in terms of providing estimates of the macro grade. And then, of course, in our world, we do bulk sampling, and this is absolutely critical to try and get us up to the 500 carat mark, which is the guideline for recovery of diamonds to qualify as an inferred resource. And this gives us not just preliminary estimates of diamond grade, but diamond value too as well. Now, if you look at this is where a drone image of our bulk sampling exercise. If you go and look at Google Earth now, you'll find that the area has been fully rehabilitated as we put everything back, put the topsoil back, and with a couple of rainy seasons, the grass and the trees have begun to grow over the area. So what are the results that we've actually generated from this particular area? Firstly, if I look at the mineral chemistry, and I particularly focus on the garnet side, because that's something which many will be familiar with in the diamond industry, that we have abundant G10 garnets, unsurprisingly, because we have abundant diamonds in the area, but not just that, where it tells us there will be a strong likelihood of finding peridotitic diamonds. We also have abundant eclogitic garnets too, which suggests that we would find abundant eclogitic garnets, eclogitic diamonds too, and that's indeed the case. Professor Tapp previously from the University of Johannesburg has been doing quite a lot of research in this area, and his current thinking is that after doing a lot of mineral chemistry work, which is yet to be published, is this in fact is not a conventional group 2 kimberlite, but rather a hybrid group 1/2 kimberlite, and this may have significant implications for prospecting in the region. If we're looking at the petrography here, these are, as classified by doctors Roby and Mishra, group 2 coherent hyperbyssal kimberlites, or apatite-bearing calcite phlogopite kimberlites. And these are slightly different from the Marsfontein pipe, which has 2 kimberlitic phases. And it's thought at that time that Marsfontein was an unexploded kimberlite. But sadly, because Marsfontein was mined out in only 18 months, there is very little research done on that to say whether that is true or not, and how that can actually help us in terms of modern exploration. Of course, it would be remiss not to actually talk about diamonds. You can see some of the diamonds in this graph itself, and we would use this to give us estimates of the macro and micro grade, as well as give us estimates of the diamond value itself. And there on the right-hand side, you see the kind of total diamond content curve, which we would typically use in the area. Geological modeling, this is now as we go down the pipeline, because we've got abundant geophysical data as well as a fairly large amount of drilling data, and because we're looking at the root zone of the kimberlites, which tends to be quite complex, we are using inversion and forward modeling techniques to give us the model. Now, here's anybody out there who wants to get involved in this, I would get involved with this, because I could only find one group in the country who could actually help us do this. Other groups are in Australia and Canada. So here's a business opportunity for your budding geophysicists. And then we compile all this together in terms of a competent persons report. Professor Marshall and I jointly co-authored this report. It is quite dated now. This was dated in February 2018. It will need to be updated once we've actually finished the current body of work. Botswana Diamonds is an AIM-listed company, so we basically manage according to the SAMREC code of resource reporting. And then in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I've tried to stick to the original timeline of finishing at 1:45, even though I started at 22. So please forgive rushing through it, because I thought we could try and get back on track. Modern diamond exploration requires the application of advanced and complementary technologies. I think in the olden days, you could use soil sampling or geophysics and identify the kimberlite. And at that time, it was cutting technologies for that time. But today, those days are long past. Of course, these areas are informed by the geological model. Just remember my comment about Marsfontein being partially obscured and potential other Marsfonteins, which could be fully obscured itself. It's not just that, but the level of precision required today is much higher than it has been required in the past. And if I use another project which Botswana Diamonds acquired last year from Petra, which is the KX36 discovery in Botswana itself, this area was covered by a couple of the majors and many other juniors before Petra actually picked it up. And it is the only high-grade diamondiferous kimberlite pipe discovered subsequent in Botswana to the Arapa and the Driling clusters. And that was done because of incredibly precise sampling and exploration technologies. So one has to actually ask the question, why is there only one blow, Marsfontein, in the Nkumpi Valley itself? Why are there three blows sitting in the Transvaal sequence, the mountains which you can see the sun setting on in the photograph on the right? Are there more blows to be found? And that's what Botswana Diamonds, in partnership with the local company Vitomi Mining Pty Limited, is looking at. And we believe there are. And we believe with the creative and precise application of several technologies, if there's something to be found, we'll find it. But of course, this requires patient shareholders. And we're delighted that there is still an appetite for diamond exploration of this nature by the people who actually invest in Botswana Diamonds, who are typically the friends and the family of our board, and a number of shareholders throughout the UK. Sadly, it is very difficult to raise money in South Africa for exploration, but I think we all know that. And if you asked Peter that question earlier, he would give you the good reasons why. I would too as well, but it's beyond the scope of this particular talk. And then before I kind of hand over back to the chair, I would just like to, you can read the slide, I'm not going to go through it, to do something like this. If you're a junior where you don't have the capacity, if you're at De Beers, for example, of your geoscience center, your mineral resource management department, you don't have that. I'm the sole permanent employee in Botswana Diamonds, so I have to rely on expert consultants, expert academics, expert contractors to get the work done. And I'm delighted, if you look at this particular team here, of some of the foremost thinkers and workers in the area, in their particular areas, to support us in trying to find that next Marsfontein. So thank you very much indeed for your time, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you enjoyed that little whiz through the technological approaches to diamond exploration on the Thorny River diamond deposit.